Mind over matter, overcompensating, overstatements, crookedness relating, the soul's churn in return, mental overstimulation, one word, riveting, it tethers my pilot, streams that are promised to make seeking less. Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to Poetry Journal podcast. Hope everybody's doing well today. Positive vibes, and we have a special guest here today. It's a pleasure to have her on. But first things first, let me just go through her resume. Highly recommended. Award-winning journalist, social documentarian, specializing in profiling racial and social justice, amplifying marginalized voice, and finally, you're an author now. The book is called Reimagining the Revolution, and specifically speaking into 4 stories of abolition, autonomy, forging new paths in modern civil rights movements. Miss Paula Lehman-Ewing, welcome to Poetry Journal podcast. How are you, Miss?
Thanks, Alex. It's great to be here.
And it's great to have you. Thank you for sharing some of your time to have a sit down with me. It's great to have you on.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the podcast and of your poetry in particular.
I appreciate that. Something stood out to me just reading in your email. The one thing that you mentioned was about your book specifically, that fact that the artist's drawings were actually made by artists that was incarcerated when they did the drawing. I thought that was very unique. You don't really hear a lot of that these days, you know. And for you to kind of put that in your book, I thought that was I really liked that part of it.
Yeah, I've been really moved by prison art. I was the editor of a newspaper for a grassroots organization representing currently and formerly incarcerated individuals, and it was really instilled at us that if you're going to fight the carceral system, the people at the forefront of that fight should be the people most impacted by it, so people who are actually incarcerated. And so every month I would put a full page drawing of created by an artist who was incarcerated. That's how I met 2 of the artists who I feature in my book. But once I started looking at this stuff, and once I got entrenched in it, and artists started sending me originals, I was awestruck, because not only are they so talented, and we lock up so much talent in the most incarcerated nation in history, being the United States, but they're able to find beauty and hope in this horrific situation that they're in. And I've tried to apply that to areas of my own life when times get dark.
Absolutely. That's very interesting. Before we go, let me just read a quote, and I really want to just give you the floor, because I'd like to kind of share, speak about your book a little bit. I like people to have them listen to you break it down.
Okay.
So this is my quote for today. You know, as you know, I like to have a piece of quote for every time I put a podcast together. It says, life to live, but do not know where to start. Sometimes being in the middle of nowhere is part of finding your path. In the aftermath, here comes roads like hindsight and a face that makes art. crisscrossing lines at first sight. Where do I start? Wanting to be better, be the better version, but time's so smart. Rushing to the next milestone with a fright like finite. Nothing more to the world. If the senses don't synchronize, got to be wise to tell it to the world, thus they relate to your surmise. But who am I? But the sort of Tolstoy to my time. Just that's all I have for today. But just a little.
Cheers! I love it.
Just something to I thought it would apropos with the sort of conversation we're having.
Okay, great.
So tell us about your book. Tell us about your book, please.
Sure. So the book is Reimagining the Revolution. It comes out at the end of this month on July 23rd, but you can pre-order it now. And it's about the people I've met in my journey through the modern civil rights movements. So it's strategists and architects of a new way of moving to create social change. There are 4 organizations that I profile. 2 of them are founded by incarcerated activists. Hashima Denham is currently in Kern Valley State Prison in California, and Ivan Kilgore, who is incarcerated in Solano, California.
Yeah.
And in between those 2, I profile Critical Resistance, which is one of the oldest grassroots organizations. It was founded by Angela Davis, Ruth Wilson Gilmore, Rose Baez, and I also profile Greenwood Bank, which is Killer Mike's economic revolution. It's out of Atlanta. Killer Mike, the rapper, one part of Run the Jewels, but now he's embarked on this amazing solo career. And so I kind of look at those people and how they're using their life experience to design ways to move forward. I was, that paper that I mentioned, I worked at that organization in 2020 when everything hit the fan here. And, we had to really rethink how we were moving, not only because, the people who are informally incarcerated are compromised immune systems because they have lacked proper health care and sunlight and all the things needed for a positive health during their incarceration. And so it was hard to get them in big groups because that was dangerous for them. I mean, a lot of people still did it, but we started to sort of think about new ways to move. And not only that, but we were looking at the same stuff that people were fighting for in the 1970s. I mean, a lot of the Voting Rights Act has been rolled back. We're looking. We still obviously have a problem with immunity for police officers, and so there's a number of things that are still present. And so a lot of people within the movement were discussing how to move differently and exact real change. And so I wanted to share those conversations with the world because I think that we really need to think outside the box and design a new way of thinking to find a new way of living.
Absolutely. And one of the pivotal points of one of the things that you're doing involved within this whole thing that you're speaking about pertaining to your book and what the initiative of sorts that you have going on is the artistic part of it, which is pretty much what we're touching on, the incarcerated and formerly incarcerated artists using art to heal from trauma, connect with other incarcerated people, and amplify abolitionist change. And I think that's very profound. If nothing else, for that to come out of it, that's so much. That's a beautiful thing. It's so rehabilitating in itself. I think this is something that people can somewhat cultivate, run with, and develop as something for the future to perhaps, as they say before, somewhat prevent as opposed to cure, and vice versa, in fact, because that's pretty much what you're doing right now, in a sense of rehabilitating after the fact, or even during the process, of serving your sentence, etc. So I think there's a lot to that, and I can only commend you for your involvement and where you've taken this. There's a lot to you.
I deserve very little credit especially when it comes to the artists. It blows my mind that it will take someone like me writing a book for people to recognize artists like Scott Smith, Gerald Morgan, and Carnell Hickett, because what they were able to do, to find that freedom within themselves, that creative freedom, in a place that denies them freedom in every aspect of their lives, is just so powerful. And the other thing is that I think at the core of how we can find common ground is to identify with each other's humanity. And there's nothing more human than creating art.
Absolutely. It's something about it. I don't know. I suppose as humans, there is a certain vulnerability, imperfection that comes with us, and I suppose in a sense it's a reminder of that when you with art, and there's a certain humbleness that you get from creating, but it's almost an antithesis, because at the same time you look at your art and sometimes it revolves around something that's somewhat perfect. Some people would idolize it to the point where it's perfection, but it's actually not meant to be. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I consider myself an artist when I write, and so I do feel that vulnerability putting myself out there in a book. I am a career journalist, so I am used to sitting behind a byline and not exposing myself and being associated with a larger publication. And this does feel much different. And I think you're, to your point of imperfection, I think that I talked to someone in the book, Glenn Martin, who's in New York, and he pointed out that one of the big problems with nonprofits and reform movements is that they're looking for a poster child. They're looking for a perfect person. And you get someone who is incarcerated, and clearly they have flaws, but don't we all? And so, you kind of see where those imperfections are not necessarily what makes us criminal and not criminal, but what makes us all human.
Absolutely. And like I said, especially when you have somebody that's so prolific with creating, sometimes it's easy to forget that that person is still human, and there is a sense of he's not perfect, so you just bear with him. He's allowed to make mistakes. That's the
sorry. Well, I was going to say the other artist is Carnell Honeycutt. I use one of his. He's not someone that I interacted with when I was a newspaper editor, but I met him in the process of writing the book, and he creates graphic novels out of some of the major publications around abolitionist thought. It includes, he made the new Jim Crow. He made a graphic novel version of that, and this was all out of his Supermax prison cell in Connecticut. And he also did a graphic novel of Race to Incarcerate that he actually was able to send to the author, who I happened to be at a conference with.
Yeah.
And that author found it too difficult, based on Carnell's restrictions,
Yes.
to work with him directly. So they created a graphic novel with someone who was not incarcerated, and just sort of left Carnell behind. And so I don't, I know Carnell didn't have like a perfect situation, but like he had a story to tell, and he was a lot closer to that story than the person who ended up drawing the graphic novel. And so I was so excited when he said I could include his part of that graphic novel of Race to Incarcerate in my book, because I think it was a real missed opportunity to show something really great from someone who was so close to the situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a monumental feat, and I'm sure he doesn't, necessarily see it like that, because most artists don't necessarily see it like that to begin with. But from the outside looking in, it seems to me like that's a monumental feat for someone in his position, and he should be proud. That's something, that's, you've done something, and it matters, so I'm glad that you're the type of person to somewhat echo other people's accomplishments, and clearly that's why you have this voice that you have.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have impacted me a lot more than I've impacted them, but I do. Two of the artists have been released since I started working on the book. Gerald and Carnell are both out, and they're both planning to create something of their art, just because it was so voluminous, just because like that was their safe space, that was their freedom, that was their sanctuary, was those art studios. And so but the other thing is that Gerald in particular I worked with a lot when I was at the All of Us or None newspaper, and he is at Fisherman's Wharf. He lives in San Francisco now, and he had got a job near Fisherman's Wharf. And I don't know if you've ever been to San Francisco, but it's high-end art gallery after high-end art gallery. I popped my head in there a few times. There's no way I could afford anything in any of those stores. And I think a lot of times people say, well, that's fine art, that's value, right? And I think that people who create inside prison should be given even more value. Like I think these things that these guys send me for free, just so that someone on the outside of those walls gets to see them, I think they should go for six figures. I did compensate the artists for their work with the book, because part of the hypocrisy of our system is that we're not putting actual monetary value on the people who are helping us fight it. And so I wanted to, if anyone's out there considering a collaboration, or it's looking into prison art, just to keep in mind that like the mental and emotional strength that it takes to create this and to put it out into the world, into a world that has basically shunned you and shut you up, and to reach back into that society, I think that is beyond any sort of numbers.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I can only commend you, because it seems to me, it might not seem a lot to you, but it sounds like you've gone above and beyond to accommodate and respect, if not the person, but the art in itself. But it sounds to me like, you've kind of, you're seeing the whole picture, not just the art itself. And it takes a certain type of person to actually give the response that you've done to these gentlemen, to what they've created and what they tried to do, or turn their life around in a certain instance. So don't sell yourself short,
Well, and I do want to say, if you want to learn more about, I didn't want to just put them in as incarcerated artists, because you and I have talked a lot about the person behind the art. So the
Absolutely.
book does